The final part of the assignment that we're going to focus on here is the idea of taking this setup, again, regardless of whether you're in Gravit or in Illustrator, and applying a custom color approach to this. So the standard color wheel we've done multiple times. I want you to actually have to think a little bit more about the color, the sequencing of colors, what blended colors might look like, and so forth. And I have a couple of tricks if you're having difficulty at any point figuring out what the heck that does in fact mean. I am going to open up my color mixer and go ahead and start to at least pick something. You do not have to pick exactly the colors that I am using. This is merely a suggestion, but I don't want a standard color wheel for this. I do want you to alter it in some way, and you cannot do any impossible color combos, meaning ones that cannot end up in a blend that you are showing on screen. So there are some limitations automatically with that. I'm going to go with a cool color scheme. It's sort of gray outside today. I'm feeling a little blah, so I'm going to start with my cool colors, which in my case I'm going to make sort of a medium to dark blue my beginning point. And then I'm going to figure out where to go from there. If I just want to do blues, purples, and greens, then that has to make logical sense as I move my way around. So maybe I want to make my first color blue, my triad, meaning about equidistant apart. I want to make that sort of a medium to dark green, and I want to make this one in the reddish purple area. And everything I do from here has to work within what I've set up. And again, this is not a standard color wheel, but it can be made to work. So what I have to do is come up with all of the different shades of blues and greens that would be between the blue and the green. The green and the purple is a little bit more challenging, but I do have a trick for that one, and I'll show you that as we go. Now, what can be helpful is if you use the eyedropper to make the next swatch similar to the one you're starting from, basically, and then you can use, again, I can't leave it this way, but it's the jumping off point. So I can see what the sliders are in the CMYK arena, which stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. I can also pick RGB. I find that a little harder to work in, but if you prefer that, you can do that as well. And then we have the color range stuff at the bottom. If I'm moving more towards the green, I would actually expect the blue to have less magenta in it, which is hot pink. So it would be a little bit more of a blue-green, and I could just move that slider back if I want to do it that way. Or I can move the color picker around in the CMYK spectrum at the bottom. Same kind of thing with this one. I would expect this to be still blue-green because I'm between the blue and the green, but less blue and more green than I have been up until this point. Not too yellow-green because that's not possible either, but let's see. Something a little more like that. And then the one that's in between, I would want to make sure logically that it seemed like it could actually be between the two colors. So you're seeing the beginning of the range that's there. The green to purple, again, is going to be a little trickier because those are not two colors that are normally shown like this, obviously, on a color wheel. We got to get some yellow into the mix to make the green, but we got to get the yellow out of the mix and into the red to make the purple. So that's where this funky transitional range comes in. And what I need to do is actually figure out the one that actually happens in between them, and I'll show you a little bit of a trick. I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key, depending on your persuasion, meaning which package you're using, and I'm going to sort of and I did a copy of each. I'm going to overlap the two of them at the bottom. I'm going to click on the top one. I'm going to open up my transparency palette, and I'll try to scoot down so you can see it. And I'm going to change the color of the top color, meaning the purple. In my case, if you're green or the top one, or if you have different colors, fine. I'm going to change my blending mode from normal to multiply. And what I want to see is what the two colors look like when they are layered over each other and one of them is transparent. So that's what I've done here. It is a delightfully unpleasant shade of sort of grayish, greenish brown. But that is a color. I have something to work from there. And using that, I could grab the eyedropper and I could attempt to pick that color up. It doesn't even recognize what the heck I'm looking at there. It, you know, it just sees the purple, but it gives me something to work from. So the eyedropper doesn't help, but visually I got it. So I'm going to select my circle that's halfway in between the two, and I'm going to try to create a delightful muddy gray-brown shade that is somewhere in between the two, which technically probably should be in the dark reds based on the way those fall on a color chart, and that's not too far off. I do think it might be a little too black. Yeah, there we go. That's hideously yuck enough. It's sort of equal parts of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. It's all just eh. But it's the in-between, and that is a reasonable color for that. So if we have this as the in-between stage of those, then how do we get from weird gray, muddy brown to green? It will be another example where if you're having trouble visualizing it, you could copy your two. I'm going to layer the green over the weird other color. So I'm going to bring it forward. I'm going to set its blending mode to multiply. And it's showing up darker than it ought to there. Actually, maybe I should do it the other way around. Maybe I need to put this one on top. Let's see how that works. Sometimes, yeah, it's still showing it pretty dark. If I were to reduce the opacity of this guy, you can see that what you're kind of getting is a dark, it's a pretty dark green, really, more than anything else, because the other colors are just really deepening that effect. So it might be somewhere in this range. And it would need to be normal, but it needs to be more green. So I need more cyan and maybe a little bit less magenta. And that is my delightful in-between shade. And I moved mine earlier when I should not have done so. So anyway, and you would repeat that for all of them. Now, one thing I want you to take away from this is that, first of all, make sure you're not dragging your shapes away like I am. But secondly, make sure perhaps that you don't just do these really difficult combos, because they do take longer to figure out and calibrate and so forth, because they're not standard mixes, and figuring out the best way of approaching them can be a little tricky. But ultimately you can get there for almost any blend, even if the midpoint between your two funky colors is something like a brown. Now, my purple to blue should be pretty easy. I would start, as I did previously, with the ones to the right and left. And then make this one a little bit more purple. And then I would make the purple one a little bit more blue, and so forth. So a little bit more magenta, we'll take that one closer to the purple. A little bit more cyan, which is the turquoisey color, we'll take the purpley one closer to the blue. And this in between is going to be somewhere halfway in between those other two, which is even more blue in that case. Maybe that's a little bit too much. So when you're done, you end up with that custom colored circle. You don't have to pick the ones I did, but this is just an example of how you would do something that was a bit different, and how to figure out, if you're not sure, what those in-between colors are or can be. Okay?